Hello, everyone. Welcome to Decoding Downtowns, brought to you by Vistity. In this podcast, we dive deep with leaders from business improvement districts across the nation, revealing the strategies that are shaping the future of urban development and economic growth. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so welcome to the podcast. I'm Jamie Schwartzman. Today we're talking to Nick Griffin. He's the Executive Vice President at the DTLA Alliance in downtown Los Angeles. Nick, welcome. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Certainly will. Yeah, Nick Griffin, Executive Vice President of the DTLA Alliance, formerly the Downtown Center Business Improvement District. I've been with the BID for about 10 years. And before that, I was a broker, a commercial broker in New York City, also for about a dozen years. Before that, I was in the technology business, actually. Prior to that, I was in and around the media and entertainment business in Los Angeles. So I bring a kind of varied, set of experiences and skills and interests to this work. And oddly enough, it all seems to come together.
Great. So what inspired you, Nick, to pursue the path of moving into a business improvement district?
Yeah, well, I had worked in my work as a broker. I actually worked with a bunch of business improvement districts. I was aware of them. They really started in New York. And so it was a type of entity that I was aware of and interested in. And, in some ways, so it wasn't a huge leap. I often joke that I'm actually still brokering. I just don't get a commission now. But I've always loved cities. I grew up in Brooklyn in the 70s and 80s, and despite the sort of conventional wisdom about that as a sort of time of urban decline, I have this sort of idealized, memory and experience of it as a place of, active, busy streets and vibrant local neighborhoods and, culture and diversity and, hopping on the train and being able to get everywhere. So I have this sort of idealized, sort of sense of cities. So that's, that's always been with me. And, I also think that, and I've come to realize this almost more after the fact, is that there was a period in New York after 9/11, and I was a broker then. And, on the surface, it was a very dark period at the moment, of course, because it was a terrible crisis. But the period that followed that was a truly unique, time of transformation for Lower Manhattan. And I found it incredibly inspiring because it was really a coming together of, just a sort of unprecedented coalition of players, property owners, city agencies, state and federal government, local organizations, the community, arts and culture organizations, all to envision, the future of this place. And it worked. It's now like one of the most dynamic neighborhoods in New York. And, that was really a turning point for me because it really showed me kind of the strength and resilience of cities and what was possible when people came together around them. So that's very much informed my sort of, my ethos and perspective and sort of philosophy about place management, really. And actually the Downtown Alliance, I'll give a shout out to the Downtown Alliance in Lower Manhattan. They were one of the driving forces because they, like all bids or most bids, exist at this unique position kind of in the middle of a web of different contacts. So, we have relationships with property owners, local residents, local businesses, city agencies. We are the sort of connector and conduit, and that's a very interesting place to be, and one that can be, when done properly, super impactful. So that's, all of that is the kind of, weaving path that got me to this work. And the work that I'm doing now is fantastic because it really is a confluence of so many of my interests. It's cities, it's business, it's technology. I bring my media experience to it, interest in arts and culture, so many different aspects that I get to bring to the work I do.
Well, Nick, you mentioned, post 9/11 in New York, and, now we're sort of post pandemic in Los Angeles. And how do you see those two? How do you see that kind of the conditions
Yeah.
that were ripe for Renaissance in New York? How do you see that happening in LA now?
Well, and my team is probably sick of me using the analogy and the parallel, but I think it's apt. I mean, granted, I don't think the crisis is nearly as bad as it was then. The prognosis for Lower Manhattan at that point was that it was finished. No one would ever want to work, live. They certainly would be no reason to visit. It really was, really bleak. And it's not as bad now. But that said, we are in I don't want to say it's not an existential crisis. It's an existential shift that we're in the process of now. And that is there's a very strong parallel to the 9/11 period, because really what revitalized Lower Manhattan post 9/11 was the growth of the residential sector, the conversion of a lot of old office buildings into residential that brought residents in. It was the bringing in of arts and culture. It was the opening of restaurants. It was kind of everything but office, right? Because honestly, pre 9/11, Lower Manhattan had become an office market that was not that desirable. And so the interesting parallel now is that with the rise of remote work and the challenges that has brought to the office sector, the importance of those other sectors is really growing. And what's interesting about that is it's actually a continuation of a pattern and a trend and an evolution that downtown was already undergoing. The renaissance of downtown LA sort of transforming from a traditional 9-to-5 business district to a really 24/7 mixed use urban center began back in 1999 with the adaptive reuse ordinance, and that led to the conversion of lots of old, at the time obsolete office buildings into residential. Huge wave of residential. Also the creation of Staples Center, now Crypto.com, and LA Live. Those two anchor things drove a real transformation. One on the residential side, the other on the hospitality, tourism, sort of sports and entertainment side. And so now this is in a lot of ways a continuation of the trends that were already underlying the change in downtown. So we're trying to lean into that. We have it in our DNA, and we feel like that's the path forward. The wonderful irony or sort of interesting postscript to the 9/11 story is that once the residential came in and all the restaurants came in and the arts and culture and the tourism and all that, you know what that did? It made the office sector really appealing. All of a sudden, everyone wanted to work there again, too, because they're like, oh, that's a really cool place. Now we want our office there.
So, Nick, for our listeners who may not be familiar with your district, give us an overview of it and share what makes it unique and exciting.
Yeah, so our district is 65 square blocks in what I call the downtown of downtown. It's kind of the center of downtown. It comprises Bunker Hill in the financial district, Pershing Square, part of the historic area where Grand Central Market is, the jewelry district. And it is, on the one hand, the largest concentration of office space and workers and sort of commerce on that level for all of Los Angeles by a long shot. It's really the 800-pound gorilla on that front.
Density.
On the other hand, over the last 20 years, as we discussed, it has greatly diversified. So Grand Avenue on the top of Bunker Hill has built this amazing cultural district with MoCA, the Broad, the Disney Concert Hall, the Music Center, the Colburn School, to the point where we have a greater concentration of world-class arts and culture assets of anywhere else other than possibly, New York, Paris, but it puts us on that level, right? And at the same time, we've had this really significant growth of residential population in our district, and then hotels and incredible, mix of restaurants and stuff. So it's really, our district is a microcosm of all of downtown in having really strongly diversified. I would say that in some ways, the arts and culture growth has been perhaps the most definitive in terms of shaping downtown, because it really has made it a place of innovation and creativity. It's not only that it attracts people to the programming of those organizations and institutions, it's also that their existence attracts creative industries who want proximity to that culture. It attracts cultural tourists who want to be in the milieu of that kind of an environment. It attracts the type of residents who want a sophisticated urban experience. And so that's been really definitive. I think the last thing that I would say about our district, because I think it's indicative in a lot of ways of all great cities and kind of why they are what they are. I talk a lot about how cities are really about intersections. They're about the intersection of sectors, the office sector, the retail sector, the residential sector, the arts and culture sector. They're the intersection of people and ideas. And it's the connection of those things and the cross-pollination of them that really makes cities so dynamic and exciting and productive. That's been the case, for all time, since the Roman times, when people come together in cities for really tangible reasons. In some ways, they're kind of the epitome and embodiment of human society, right? And our district has that great mix. It's got the companies, it's got the arts and culture institutions, it has the residential neighborhood, the tourism, it has all of those things, and it's the cross connections of those that really make it an exciting, dynamic place and make it resilient and a place that can get through those things. A monoculture is not what you want. And so honestly, and don't tell this to my big office owners, but I'll trade an office for a residential any day, because the more that dynamic mix happens, the more vibrant it will be.
So, Nick, explain to us how the DTLA Alliance is organized and kind of the role that you play in supporting economic development in your district.
Yeah, so our bid, like most, is funded by a tax assessment on our property owners within our district. About 2/3 of that budget goes to our clean and safe operations, which is really the bulwark of what we do and how we impact the district. And then 1/3 of it goes to marketing and economic development. So marketing is really focused on consumer, the resident, worker, visitor-oriented communications, events, activations, all meant to promote downtown, as the place to be. On the economic development side, which honestly is very highly integrated with marketing, we're focused on investors, developers, property owners, major employers, brokers, the professional community. And what we really focus on, because we don't have, capital dollars or incentive dollars as a bid. So what we focus on is telling the story and shaping the narrative about downtown. And, it's interesting because on the surface, that might seem like a superficial thing that we're kind of just doing B2B marketing. Well, it is on some level, but when you dig down, it's pretty tangible, because what that means is that we're using data, statistics, analysis, insights to paint this picture of downtown and then communicate that out with our market reports, our newsletter, social media, other content communication channels, and to leverage that to connect with a very targeted audience, those investors, brokers, developers, and then connect with them in person. It's almost a sales funnel where we're using that to get the word out and to engage them. And then we very often will work with them directly as a result of that.
And so in that process, Nick, what challenges are you facing right now promoting economic development? And what are some of the things you're doing to solve those challenges?
Yeah, shaping the narrative is more important now than ever, because there's plenty of negative narrative out there. And a lot of it is because that's the way the media works. If it bleeds, it leads, and no one's telling the story about how things are going really nicely. So, and that's particularly the case because of the kind of demise of local media. It's a very underappreciated factor at play here, particularly for downtowns, is that you don't have local media who are really focused on it and telling that story. And so what that means is the only time downtown gets covered is when an office building, goes into foreclosure, someone gets shot, there's a wave of robbery, even though the big picture is that the market is fairly healthy, crime is down, but no one reports that, right? So we have really seen that there's an opportunity, more like a necessity, for us to step into that void and to be telling the much truer, fuller story of what's going on down here. And what we have gotten really good at, we've gotten good at creating the content, the reports and such, but we've also gotten really good at targeting the audience who needs to hear that, because we don't need to tell everyone that. We have a targeted business audience, and those are the people who need to know. And so we really focus on, whether it's through our newsletter, which has a really great targeted subscriber base, or events that we do which are specific audience, or the way we target on social media, so that the right people are hearing that right message.
I see. And what's, if you could offer maybe one actionable step that our listeners could, learn from you that are involved in economic development efforts, what do you think that would be?
I think it's really finding ways to tell your story with intention and focus to a targeted audience. So what I mean by that is, you're not just telling it and putting it out there. You need to have, what are you trying to do with that story? Who are you trying to connect with on that? What is the message that you're trying to get through? And then how are you following through on it? I'll give you a good example. We recently launched a hospitality initiative, and that hospitality initiative was anchored with our hospitality report for the first time we created. And we've done office, retail, residential. We've kind of done every sector, but hospitality was the last one. So we produced this great report on hospitality and tourism, full of relevant data, stats on the industry, highlighting all the key assets in downtown, competitive advantages, hotels, attractions. And then we released that report in conjunction with the IPW conference, which is a huge, it's a major international tourism buyer conference. We worked with LA Tourism to make sure that our report got in front of those folks. We worked with all of our local hotels to make sure that that report was visible to the delegations that were staying in their hotels. And then we promoted it both through our newsletter, but also on social media, targeting tourism industry audiences. So that was the whole push to promote it. But the other piece of that, and this is key, is that we also used it as a vehicle to connect with all of our hotels. And we've then, out of that, created a working group of hotel managers and concierges to work with them so we can most effectively support and promote what they're doing. So what you see is what looks like just a piece of content or maybe a kind of promotional campaign is really multifaceted and really plays a lot of different roles in trying to move the needle on a key sector.
I see. So you're basically, what you're saying here is just producing a report isn't enough.
That's the start.
You've got to get it out there in multiple different ways to multiple different individuals and target it.
Yep.
Great.
And use it as a vehicle for connecting with your own folks too. And that's a big part of it. Strengthening, any bid will knows that having strong relationships with your own constituency is really key.
Let's shift it for a minute and talk about economic development data and about the data that you guys are tracking. And do you have a sense of what's the most valuable data you're tracking for investors, developers, and community stakeholders?
I don't know. It's really all of it, because I don't think I could point to one. I mean, listen, we track market stats, demographic trends, visitation data. We have lists of all the projects that are in development, survey responses. it's a really wide variety. And I think that what I would emphasize about that is that it's actually the pulling together of all of that into that cohesive story that you're trying to tell. Because listen, any sophisticated investor or developer, they already have the data. They already know, what the market stats are. What they want from us and the sort of value add that we have, the unique quality, is the context and the pulling together and integrating of all of that data, that disparate market stats and survey responses and location data that tells them what that means. How does that all come together? What does that mean about this particular area? And I think that's really key.
I see. So what's changing really is that the data is almost commodity. Anybody can get the data, but understanding within context of place, that's what you can really do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Great. So let's talk about digital tools and dashboards and data visualization. How are those kinds of technologies playing a role in achieving your district's objectives?
Again, I think they're all critical pieces, and I think that different bids use them in different ways. But again, I would emphasize the extent to which it's the integration of them into what you're doing and your overarching strategy that's the most important. I think that sometimes, it can be tempting to just like, hey, if we put this dashboard up there, then we've got, then we're done. That it's not that it's not helpful. It is a good thing and it might be useful, but I really think you have to take a more holistic approach to it and recognize that that's just the front door. That's just the entry point. And what you're, going back to the idea of it, I'm a sales guy, right? So to me, it's a marketing funnel. It's a sales funnel. It's about leads. It's almost lead generation. Like I want that dashboard to pull someone in to say, well, that looks interesting. Maybe I should look a little deeper. Oh, they've got a report. Oh, wow. This is really rich. And, maybe I should talk to these guys. That the goal is talk to us because, it's why we position ourselves as a leading source of information about downtown as a resource to those folks. And whether that's a potential investor or developer or our own stakeholders who are considering how do we best operate in that market. We want to be a resource to them. And having all of the data is one piece of being a resource, but the secret sauce is integrating all that data into the holistic vision and be able to provide insights, and that's this sort of some hierarchy of where it's like data, information, insights. And we really want to be an insights business where we're making sense of that data for them.
So let's look ahead, right, and into the coming year. What would you say are some of the main priorities or initiatives for your district?
So we went through a strategic planning process last year. Coming out of the pandemic, we really felt that a lot had changed. There were a lot of new challenges. A lot was up in the air. We really wanted to kind of look at everything that we were doing and how. And so the most visible change that came out of that was the change of our name from the Downtown Center Business Improvement District to the DTLA Alliance. I think we could all agree that the DTLA Alliance is a much catchier name than Downtown Center Business Improvement District, especially since it seems like actually lots of people don't even know what a business improvement district is, including many of our stakeholders. But all kidding aside, that name change was not cosmetic. That name change was about communicating the extent to which almost everything that we do as an organization, that most bits do as organizations, is in partnership with just a myriad, stakeholders, local businesses, LAPD, city agencies, LA tourism, it just, the gamut of folks, it's all in partnership. And it was really key for us to communicate that, partly because the stronger those partnerships are and the more awareness there is out there about us and what we do, the more effective and impactful we can be. So that was a key thing. And just being the DTLA Alliance is definitely, that's a big part of our go forward plan.
Nick, how long has it been since you did your renaming?
It was official the beginning of this year.
I see. So this is a brand new initiative.
It
And maybe you
is,
could share a little bit about that for maybe some of the other listeners who are thinking about the names and thinking
yeah.
about brand and that kind of stuff. And how difficult has it been for you? Has it caused a lot of confusion? What
It
happened?
hasn't at all. I will say that, our VP of marketing, Bree Von Faith, is brilliant. She did a great job of doing it. That said, it was such a natural move that it was just welcomed with open arms and we have not had a bump along the road. I mean, there was a whole lot of detail that went into it. You would not believe the number of things that had to be changed. Fortunately, though, we didn't change kind of our branding and our design and stuff. It was really just the name. But so the other thing that came out of, in terms of our plans going forward, the other big thing that came out of that strategic planning process was that we came up with 3 guiding principles for the organization, and they really encompass what we do in a way that now has become like our
Can you share those 3 principles?
yeah. So it's improving the place and experience, building community and coalitions, and telling the story and shaping the narrative. Everything kind of flows from the 3 of those. Those become our gut check on everything. Where does this project that we're thinking about fall into? And as we talked about, the telling the story and shaping the narrative is a huge part of that. And as we talked about, the ways that we do that have gotten more and more dynamic and compelling. We've worked with you guys with Vistity to create sort of a whole new way of telling that story, which has been super compelling for us.
And too, you've been, instrumental in really shaping and guiding much of the platform's development. So
and what's even more relevant, I think, to that is that project, as you know, came directly out of the pandemic. Like literally, we were like, holy cow, we're not going to be putting 50 people on a bus for a tour. And tours were like, that was a signature offering of the bid. That we did it, on the regular. And it's an important part. And we were like, we're not going to be putting people on a bus anytime soon. And came to you and we talked through it and explored a lot of ways. One of the reasons, and it's morphed and changed, and it's become a really great tool for us. But one of the aspects of its genesis that I think is particularly important, because it harkens back to what we were talking about the unique ability of folks in a bid to understand their district and to communicate it, is, as you, I'm sure, remember, we kept coming back to and pushing the idea that this platform needs to somehow capture what I do in a meeting, which is or on a tour, which is to really show the district in its best light, to enable someone to understand where things are in relation to other things, what all is in that one little spot. And we kept, pushing on that, like, how do we make this a really compelling platform that really communicates what downtown looks like, feels like, and what's in it and why that matters. And that's why we built in all those elements where you could open up the stats and see the reports right along with it. So it's a super dynamic platform too. So you're not just looking at pretty pictures, you're actually being able to drill down into all this. So that was, as you remember, it was a wonderful process creating it. Super
dynamic. A lot of late night phone calls.
Yeah, well, and particularly because it was a time of such concern and doubt, where we were really, listen, the narrative out there, talking about negative narratives, like the common line seemed to be like, cities are done, like downtowns are through, like just close it up and lock the door and throw away the key because everyone's moving out, like, which we never bought. That was certainly what was in the media. So, yeah.
There's a lot of exciting things going on in Los Angeles in the upcoming years. The Lucas Museum is opening, the Olympics. What are your long-term goals for the district?
Yeah, well, this gets back to sort of my really pretty strong optimism about the longer term. And so when folks get, overly concerned, in my mind, about the immediate challenges, I'm always reminding them of the bigger picture, because the bigger picture is that we are a super dynamic downtown at the heart of a world-class city, second largest city in the country, one that is on the world, stage and is about to be really on the world stage, both with the World Cup in 2026 and then the Olympics in 2028. Much of the Olympics, and some folks may not know this, much of the Olympics this time will be centered around downtown. There's multiple venues. The Olympic family hotels will be in downtown, the media center. So a lot of it, and that was not the case when we hosted it in 84. In fact, there really wasn't a vibrant downtown in 84. There were no events in downtown at that time. But interestingly, downtown was a featured part of our bid, of LA's bid this time. It was part of what sold the Olympic Committee on it, is that we had this center where a huge base of it could be. And we have a growing transit system, which we also didn't have in 84. And that transit system happens to be hubbed in downtown. So on a lot of levels, downtown will play a starring role. And what's interesting about that, or I think what's relevant about that, because, hey, that's a couple week event, right? But what's relevant about that to us, bigger picture, is that all of the factors that are behind downtown being a center of the Olympics are behind downtown being the center of Los Angeles, right? Because it is the hub of the transit system. It does have the largest concentration of sports and entertainment venues. It does have the largest concentration of offices and of commerce and of businesses. We have 745 retail and restaurant businesses per square mile. That's 10 times the density of the rest of LA. So that's the bigger picture for us, and that's kind of what we're shooting for. And it's a fantastic opportunity. The Olympics is a fantastic opportunity for us to step onto that global stage and show the world that we are a world-class city. So that's the bigger picture, longer term. In the more immediate future, we're just making incremental progress on the public realm and on economic growth and on businesses opening up. And it's, we're making good, steady progress.
Great. Let's play make-believe for a second and imagine that
my favorite, my favorite game.
Are meeting in magic school. You've been issued a magic wand and you've learned how to use it. Now you are getting ready to come back to downtown LA. How would you use your magic wand?
Oh, great.
Things to promote the vitality of DTLA.
Great. So, the reason that make-believe is my favorite game is that I truly believe that is how we create the future. I do think that the make-believe, you got to have the vision, right? You got to have the vision. So, so I've got my Harry Potter wand, my Harry Potter urbanism wand, right? And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert all of the excess office space to residential. Okay. Then I am going to streamline the development process, unleash a wave of building on all our surface parking lots. Okay. All around downtown, but particularly South Park and around the LA Live Convention Center. There's a big swath of empty lots there that really want to be hotels and residential buildings and all kinds of
more density, more
we're
people.
going and listen, that's the path that we're going. The DTLA 2040 plan, which is city planning's community plan for that plan projects that downtown LA's population is going to double again over the next 20 years. It went from under 20,000 to almost 100,000 over the last 20 years, from late 90s to today. The DTLA 2040 plan projects that it will double again to over 200,000. 200,000 people is the size of an average mid-sized American city. So that means you would have a mid-sized American city sitting here just in downtown in the middle of the second largest city in the country. That's important to understand that context. So definitely on that, some specifics. I want to finish the renovation of Pershing Square and rename it Biddy Mason Park. Okay, mark my words.
Why do you suggest that?
Stay tuned. Biddy Mason is an amazing character. I encourage you to look her up. She was a former enslaved person who came to California and got her freedom and became a midwife and then a property owner and became hugely successful and wealthy and influential and powerful in downtown LA. There's a small Biddy Mason sort of memorial tribute thing over by the Bradbury building, but we're looking to make a big mark and rename Pershing Square as Biddy Mason Park. So
that's super.
Stay tuned. And then I'm also going to cap the 101 and the 110 freeway in the parts that go through downtown. They are recessed anyway. We're going to cap them, create great parks there. We're going to redevelop the Broadway Trade Center, one of the big, huge building on Broadway. That is going to lead to an amazing revitalization of Broadway as a world-class retail corridor, anchored in the south by that, in the north by Grand Central Market. We can do that. There's a great Civic Center master plan, which has been sitting on the shelf for a while. We're going to implement that and give ourselves a world-class Civic Center. We'll demo those brutalist county buildings that are hemming in Grant Park and expand Grant Park. And then we want a Trader Joe's. So, and then I think I'm done. I don't think that's too much to ask, is it?
Good use of the magic. Hey, Nick, before we wrap up today, could you share with our listeners, if anyone wants to connect with you or learn more about you, how can they do that?
Well, the first thing I would say is please go to our website and sign up for our newsletters. We have several. We have a This Week in DTLA, which is kind of consumer focused. We have newly out just recently the 9 to 5-ish, which is a newsletter for office workers in our district. But
and
then
that website is downtownla.
DowntownLA.com. And then the business one, which I especially encourage for your audience, would be our DTLA Business News and Insights newsletter, which comes out about every month. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm not super active on there, but I actually do. I'm connected with a lot of great people on there. And hey, drop me a line if there's some specific questions or you just want to chat. ngriffin@downtownla.com, and I'm always happy to share a subject that I'm super passionate about, as you can tell.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. As an Angelino, I would say thank you also for your efforts. It makes Los Angeles, continuing to be a great city with the best possible weather and just an incredible city to live in. So we're so grateful for all the work that you do there.
Hey, Jamie, right back at you. The work that you do, both in your marketing and your branding. You've done great work for us on a number of fronts, and especially what you've been doing with Vistity, which I just feel like changes the game in a lot of ways and adds a really dynamic tool to our toolkit. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for doing these podcasts. This is great. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I love talking about this stuff, but especially to you,
Nick. We share the passion. Yeah. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Decoding Downtowns. I'd also like to thank Vistity for sponsoring this. Vistity is dedicated to transforming urban districts with innovative tools that enhance economic development. Learn more about our solutions at vistity.com. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating in your districts.
Thank you for joining us today for Decoding Downtowns. If you've enjoyed our podcast, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's brought to you by Vistity, the leading geospatial visualization platform for data-driven decisions. Stay connected, stay informed, and let's continue to shape the future of our cities together. Until next time, I'm Jamie Schwartzman.